And what we know in the most recent research is that 1 out of 2 cases of dementia can be prevented. It's a startling statistic. I get wide-eyed responses whenever we do talks about this because most people still believe that it sort of is something that you hope not to get, but if you get it, there's not much you can do, and there's not much you could have done not to have it. And so when we talk about these are not my numbers. These are not based on some weird diet that I've put together or some strange supplement that I want people to take. We're really not very much into supplements or diets at all. We're really into lifestyle factors as major kinds of determinants.
Hello, Dr. Clionsky. You are a clinical neuropsychologist and co-author of the book Dementia Prevention. So welcome to Modern Healthspan, and thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure talking with you and your audience, Richard.
Thank you so much. So I have not heard the term neuropsychologist before. So could you explain what is a neuropsychologist and what is it that you do?
Mhm. So I am first a clinical psychologist. So I went through, got a PhD in clinical psychology and then did an internship where we, sort of practice our skills and then became licensed as a psychologist. Uh, a neuropsychologist is someone with advanced training and experience, and who, in my case, also is board certified, has a higher credential in how the brain interacts with behavior. So we study how the brain works. A
Hmm.
neurologist, by contrast, oftentimes looks at how the brain appears and its connectedness. So they look at MRI scans, magnetic resonance imaging, or they look at a CT scan where they're looking at the structure of the brain. Or if they're looking at epilepsy, they may be looking at different waveforms that are produced when we think, and we put little electrodes on our scalp to measure what the waves are coming off. Or they may do blood tests or other laboratory tests to look at, again, how our brain is working in that kind of way. We're more interested in how the brain functions in terms of thinking. So we look at how well somebody can pay attention under a variety of circumstances. Can they focus their attention, keep their attention on something for a short period of time, divide their attention between two or more different things? Can they keep their attention focused on a longer term project, 15 to 20 minutes of remaining focused? How efficiently are they thinking? So that's one area we look at. We look at short term memory. That's really in the field of dementia. Oftentimes, the primary concern, the primary deficit is a person's inability to hold on to new information. So we will do things like tell them specific types of stories and ask them to tell it back to us, both right away and then 20 to 30 minutes later. We may give them a list of items and have them write them down and then see if they can remember the list after we take the paper away. And then we may repeat that several times to see if they're able to add to their storage of information, and then wait a little while to see if they hold on to it in the longer term. We look at problem solving, what we call executive functions, how the brain operates in terms of planning, whether we can think in abstract ways, see the larger picture of things, whether we're able to adapt to new situations and basically figure out what's going on. We also look at language, communication, and also emotional state. So by looking at all these different functions, and then we do this by giving people primarily objective kinds of tests, standardized tests, and then we can compare their scores with what we would expect for a person of their age, because it changes over the course of our lifespan. So it's age, but also their background level. If you've always been, since adulthood, an extremely bright person and you're now just at average levels for your age, that might represent a change for you, whereas somebody who's always been just an average person in terms of education and occupation, that could be normal for them. So we look at how you do now in comparison to how you should do. And that gives us information about whether or not this is a change from your normal level of functioning, whether it's declined just a little bit into what we call mild cognitive impairment, or whether it's declined even further into one of the several types of dementias, progressive neurological conditions like Alzheimer's and vascular dementia, frontotemporal dementia, etc. And I'm happy to talk about those in depth, but I just wanted to give you an overview of
Mhm.
what we do.
Excellent. Yeah. So the book focuses on Alzheimer's or the prevention of Alzheimer's, which I think is a really good point because at the moment we don't have good. Um, Actually, I'm sorry. Does the book focus on Alzheimer's?
No, the book
No,
focuses
it's
on all-cause
on
dementia.
dementia, all cause
Yeah,
dementia.
so
Sorry, my
Alzheimer's
fault.
is a
Yeah,
that's okay. Alzheimer's is a type of dementia,
dementia.
and for many people, the most commonly known type of dementia. So
Mm,
while they're aware, I've had people in my office where I tell them, based on your testing, we go over all the results. I think you have a mild degree of dementia. And they'll say, "Oh, thank you. At least it's not Alzheimer's." I say, "No, no, no, no.
right.
It's actually, in your case, could be a vascular dementia, which is caused by circulatory problems, what we used to call hardening of the arteries. It's back in vogue because we now recognize that things that affect our blood circulation, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, diabetes, some of the sleep and breathing problems like sleep apnea, all affect how our blood circulates and how it carries oxygen and nutrients to the very tips of our blood vessels, which are down in our brain. So you could have a vascular dementia. You could have Alzheimer's disease, which has a particular underlying physical pathology, which is the buildup of a protein in the brain called beta amyloid, sort of a gunky kind of cholesterol like substance, which forms plaques in the brain that gets in the way of the transmission of nerve impulses and also affects the breakdown of some of the neurons, the nerves in our brain, creating these things called neurofibrillary tangles. So the tangles and the plaques are the primary underlying pathologies we see in the Alzheimer's form of dementia. Or it could be what we call frontotemporal dementia, which usually affects younger people, people in their 50s, more often than people in their 70s. It's what the actor Bruce Willis has been diagnosed with, and it impacts speech primarily and also behavior. People become disinhibited or lose initiative. There's two ends of that spectrum. In some cases, they can't stop themselves from doing things, including some inappropriate things at times. On the other hand, they can't turn on their engine, so they spend a lot of time very passively sitting and not really interacting with the world around them. But we also know that you can get dementia from Parkinson's disease. You can get dementia from repeated blows to the head, whether it's European football or American football or rugby or a whole host of other things. So there's a number of different dementias is basically my point.
Mm.
And the important thing is trying to figure out, first of all, what level of cognition this person has. Are they normal? Do they have mild cognitive impairment, or has it slipped into dementia? Because the earlier we can identify it, the more options for treatment we have. And then trying to be more specific in figuring out, is it one form or is it more than one form in combination?
In the book, there's a lot of you talk about risk factors and things that you can do to improve that, to I guess optimize those. Would these be kind of relevant across all of the different dementias, or are they specific to specific ones? Are there different ones that you should pay attention to?
They are relevant to all the forms of dementia, although probably in frontotemporal dementia a little less so, but not entirely. I mean, it's everybody benefits from dementia prevention strategies, even those people already diagnosed with dementia. Because if you use the same kind of strategies that we use to prevent dementia, you will slow down the progression. These are progressive diseases, they get worse over time. So, job number one is slowing down or stopping progression. Then we turn to, can we do anything to improve that person's thinking abilities? But those are fairly universal. And what we know in the most recent research is that 1 out of 2 cases of dementia can be prevented. It's a startling statistic. I get wide eyed responses whenever we do talks about this because most people still believe that it sort of is something that you hope not to get. But if you get it, there's not much you can do. And there's not much you could have done not to have it. And so when we talk about these are not my numbers. These are not based on some weird diet that I've put together or some strange supplement that I want people to take. We're really not very much into supplements or diets at all. We're really into lifestyle factors as major kinds of determinants. These are based on things like the Lancet Commission. In Britain, back in 2017, Lancet magazine put together a blue ribbon panel of experts and they looked at all of those things that were in the literature. And we're talking about a wide ranging literature that's outside of neurology. It includes psychiatry, it includes endocrinology for diabetes, it includes cardiology literature, it includes literature on exercise physiology, it includes literature on internal medicine. So they looked at all of these and they came up with 9 factors that they published in 2017 that they predicted could avoid 40% of the cases of dementia. Well, 3 years later, in 2020, they came up with another 3 factors, including things like hearing loss,
Mm.
and found that you could increase the prevention ratio by a couple percentage points more than that. A couple years after that, in the United States, a different group using those same factors applied the same data to the United States sample. The original study was done using the British Biobank, the UK Biobank, which is a huge repository of data on a million people or more they've had access to their health records. One nice thing about the National Health Service is there's a lot of data that they produce as a result of that. But they applied this to 2,000 people in the United States Health and Retirement Survey in 2022, I believe it was. And they found that 62% of American cases could be avoided. I think partly because obesity is such a big factor in the US, and that's one of the main drivers of dementia. Well, just in the last couple months in 2024, the Lancet Commission has issued a new study. It's called Lancet 2024 on dementia prevention. They've now added vision loss and environmental pollution, which is, I think, harder to modify on a personal basis. It's much more of a focus for society. Anyway, they increased their percentage to 49%. And what they also told us that's really important is that the ages at where we do some of these things may be an important factor. There are certain early life conditions that are important in prevention, like head injury, for example, like tackling high cholesterol early on because you're more powerful when you started in your 30s than in your 60s. But there's also a lot of midlife factors. But even when we get people in their 70s or 80s, and even if where they're already having some dementia, intervention using these same strategies makes a difference. So I'm a big proponent of identifying these kinds of factors in everybody and helping them to reassess, what am I doing for my brain health? How can I be as brain healthy as possible throughout the entirety of my life?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like it's not something you should like, oh, I'm going to get dementia, or I can see like MCI coming on. It's like, it's from the start. You need to be thinking about these risk factors and following these procedures. Are you getting enough magnesium? Magnesium in the soil has been drastically reduced since the 1950s and is also removed by food processing, which explains why it's estimated that up to 75% of the population may be deficient. And if you've recently engaged in any sort of restricted diet for weight loss, there is a higher chance that you're not getting enough magnesium. Magnesium is a crucial mineral that's involved in over 600 biological reactions and offers amazing benefits for sleep, stress management, and hormone balance, all key factors for keeping your weight on healthy levels. Don't let magnesium deficiency derail your goals. Try Magnesium Breakthrough today and give your body the support it needs. Unlike other supplements, Magnesium Breakthrough by BiOptimizers contains all 7 forms of magnesium that your body can actually absorb, ensuring you get the full spectrum of benefits. For an exclusive offer, go to bioptimizers.com/modern and use the promo code MODERN10 during checkout to save 10%. And if you subscribe, not only will you get amazing discounts and free gifts, you will make sure your monthly supply is guaranteed. Thank you for your support. So speaking of risk factors, so you go through the risk factors in the book, and so you know we don't have time to dive into all of them, but it would be but to touch on some of them. And so there is how much does genetics play? There's a couple of genes or genetic variants that increase the risk.
There are, and we don't do much with them because we're born with them.
Mm,
So we can't pick our parents. And so I view genetics, first of all, the actual load of genetic risk is really only about 5%.
mm,
In some families where there's huge risk, because everyone's got dementia, and there's certain kinds of places in the world where the community has extremely high rates of dementia because of these are cultures where people live in a valley and they marry their cousins. And consequently, it overpopulates their genetic risk. Those people have a very high risk rate, and there's not much you can do about it. But we know those people because they're all getting dementia early. They're getting dementias in their 50s and 60s. And so everyone's grandparent, half the grandparents or more are demented. But for people living in places where there's not that kind of a risk, I don't even counsel people to get genetic testing because what would you do differently? Would you exercise more than you would ordinarily? Would you be more careful about controlling your weight? Would you do better job of monitoring your blood pressure? I don't think you need to know your genetic risk in order to maximize your individual chances. So I don't encourage people to bother with that. And frankly, it's got some concerns as to whether that information can be kept separate from the people who are selling life insurance or disability insurance,
mhm,
who might have a vested interest in figuring out statistically that you've got a higher risk. I want everybody to be looking at, okay, I need, this is important because, as we talk about in the book, nothing in there is going to hurt you that we advise. All of it has the benefit of improving your health. It may not stop you from getting dementia. We cannot make that promise, and frankly, nobody can. We can only up the odds of your staying healthy and not getting this. And that's an important job for everybody, even starting prenatally. You know, if you're a woman who is about to get or is already pregnant, you need to be taking your prenatal vitamins. You should not be drinking any alcohol, using any substances like marijuana. You should not be smoking cigarettes. you should be exercising regularly because you are already putting that child on the pathway toward either better or worse health. If you have the ability to avoid certain environmental situations, live in an area where there's a lot of air pollution, for example, and if you have the wherewithal to move somewhere that is less polluted, that would be better for your child. If there's a lot of stress in that environment because of relationship, well, that child's going to be born into that stressful environment. If there's a risk of abuse, you need to be protecting that child. So there's a lot of stuff we need to start with extremely early, and we need to be really careful about how we expose children to risks for head injuries. If they're riding bicycles, they should be wearing helmets. If they're skateboarding, they should be wearing helmets. If they're skiing, doing things like that where they're likely to fall and hit their head, you should not skimp on getting them a decent helmet. They should be wearing seatbelts whenever they're driving. I know these seem like sort of common sense kind of things, but you would be surprised. I still see people driving around in cars with kids jumping up and down in the back seat because they're not in child car seats. We need to change that.
Right. And probably not do boxing, I would guess.
Yeah, probably not do boxing.
Um,
And really decide when you're going to get involved in certain sports and are you
yeah.
going to really focus on, I mean, I don't know if where you are that they have things called bumper cars at any of the fairs or
Yeah.
amusement parks. But my children were always, Dad, I want to go in the bumper cars. And I was saying, look, I'm a neuropsychologist. I not only deal with people with dementia, I deal with people with concussions. There's no way in the world I'm going to put you into something where the whole goal is to whiplash your head back and forth. It just doesn't make sense to me. Now, on the other hand, I allowed my daughters to ride horses, even though horseback riding per capita carries the highest risk of concussions. We don't think about that. We think about rugby players and football players as having the highest risk, but per capita, it's really equestrian activities. But I insisted they have the very best helmets that they could. I really didn't want them competing at a level where they're jumping at the highest degree. Unfortunately for me, they never were good enough to do that.
Right. So you did talk about obesity. And so maybe we could generalize that as kind of metabolic disease. So anything related to high blood pressure and obesity and type 2 diabetes.
Yes.
We could kind of put them together. Now, they're kind of related to lifestyle, but I guess in a different way. But could you talk a little bit about the metabolic disease? Sorry, about metabolic disease and why is that such a high risk factor?
Great question. And you're right, they are all interrelated and they're also related to lifestyle. People who are obese tend not to exercise. People who don't exercise tend to be more obese. So they're all and they don't their blood pressure goes up, their sugar metabolism is poor. They're also more likely to experience sleep apnea while they're sleeping at night, so they're not getting enough air down to their lungs and therefore not enough oxygen to your brain. So anything that's going to affect your circulation and the ability of red blood cells to carry oxygen to the very tips of your system, your circulatory system, down in the depths of your brain, where these branch to the point of capillaries that are only wide enough to be able to let one red blood cell pass. That's all of those little areas in what they call the white matter of your brain, the deep areas of your brain where the nerve cells, the neurons, are covered by this coating made from a substance called myelin. They're called myelin sheaths. And the myelin acts as it's a word I want, sort of like the insulation around a wire and allows for the very rapid transmission of nerve cells. So that's different than what's on the surface of your brain where they're not myelinated and they're called, the gray matter. my wife, the physician, Emily, and my co-author on the book, talks about the difference in speed. She says if you're looking at gray matter on the surface of your brain, it's at a speed that you can walk at if you're a pretty fast walker, about 3 to 4 miles an hour. The white matter is moving at the speed of a Ferrari. That's how different it is. So those interconnectedness areas where all the different parts of the brain are connected up through the white matter is extremely important. And if you are not getting enough red blood cells, and if they're not carrying enough oxygen, because the sugar molecules, the glucose, has kicked out the oxygen molecule and taken its place attaching to the red blood cell. So that's what you're getting to your brain as fuel rather than the oxygen. Bad things happen to your brain connectivity, to your thinking speed, to your attention paying, to your ability to remember. And over the course of years and years, that wear and tear on your circulatory system and the nerves around it becomes a risk factor and acceleration of cognitive decline. So that's why everything we can do that's good for our heart, good for our circulation, is good for our brain. That's why people with type 2 diabetes very often experience at least mild cognitive impairment. If you have what they call pre-diabetes, which I find is a strange term, it's sort of like diabetes light. You know, your hemoglobin A1C is higher than 5.6, but it's not high enough so that your doctor classifies it as actual diabetes. You've increased your likelihood of dementia by 50%. If you get to be diabetic, you're in the range over 7, you're now at a level that doubles your risk of diabetes. So controlling blood sugar becomes incredibly important. And that's why when we see people with type 2 diabetes, we want to impact their lifestyle, change what they're eating, change what they're doing in terms of exercise, reduce their weight so that it's in keeping with their body size. It's why the new medications, what they call the GLP-1s, GLP-1s, the semaglutides, like Wegovy and Monjaro and Ozempic, that they prescribe for type 2 diabetes cause significant weight loss, actually reduce your risk of dementia. So those are really important because we have had a very difficult time over the years combating obesity. Part of it's due to our diet, part of it's due to the increase in portion size that we see in restaurants, especially here in the US. You know, what we the old plates have been replaced by larger plates. It used to be just an aesthetic thing. You have a nice large plate with a little bit of food in the middle, but it's gotten to the point where now there are much larger plates that are filled to the brim because that's people think I'm getting a better deal. This is better stuff because I got more of it. But that combined with the absence of exercise in many people, the sedentary lifestyle, the sitting in front of the TV, the video games, as opposed to walking, the driving as opposed to walking, all of those kinds of things increase our risks of obesity, increase our risks of diabetes, and subsequently is a risk factor for dementia. So it's a matter of really one of the points we stress in the book is how all of these various factors are actually interconnected.
Mm.
And that's part of what makes it both a challenge. There's no silver bullet here. There's no one medication. Here, take this. This will fix dementia. That's why it's not worked very well. It's also why no single thing, no clickbait on your Google or other feed where you're saying, oh, eat this one thing, it'll reduce your risk. Someone recently, my brother sent it to me because he spends a lot more time on social media. And it was somebody who was a quote neuroscientist. And he was saying, here's three things you can eat that are going to lower your risk for dementia: blueberries, green leafy vegetables. I forget what the third one was on his list, but I tell you, the issue was none of these, either by themselves or in combination, are going to make a significant change in the absence of doing other things. But people like these because they are quick, they are easy, and they're nice. Oh, I can eat a cup of blueberries. That'll help. You know something? I'm going to eat green leafy vegetables. I think it's wonderful. And I think they should eat green leafy vegetables. And it's better than spending their time in the fast food drive-through lane. But it's not going to fix their dementia. It's not enough. It gives them the appearance of doing enough. And that's the dangerous part. I see people all the time come in and say, oh, I eat well, so I'm good. I say, well, I don't think that's going to be enough here. It's a good start, and I applaud you for thinking it through. But it's too easy. If that were the case, if that's what all we needed, we would not have a continuous rise in the rates of dementia in the world because we would have figured it out 50 years ago. Eating is not a new thing. We've been doing it for a very long time.
Yes.
And people tell me, oh, we got to go back to eating like we did at the turn of the 20th century because that was really wholesome, fulfilling food. And I say, great. You know that what the average lifespan was in the year 1900? They say, no. I said, it was age 50. We're now living into our late 70s and early 80s. There's things that happen now because we're staying healthier. Medicine is better now that we never anticipated. And that may have been a great diet if you were working in fields every day, could burn off 4,000, 5,000 calories because you were lifting bales of hay. But it doesn't work today. We're not in the fields generally. They advertise these breakfasts in some of the restaurants. They call them lumberjack breakfasts. I don't know anyone who's doing lumberjack work these days. So we need to
Right.
look in different ways.
Yes. Uh, yeah, I think we'll leave that. But exercise, so I see exercise as kind of working in two ways. I mean, one is it's helping you to reduce your weight, but also the other thing is it's helping with the blood flow. And it seems like the blood flow is one of the key things.
It's helping with blood flow and also oxygenation. So your
Right.
oxygen carrying capacity of your blood increases as well. And it's also stress relieving. And so, if you're walking, especially if you're briskly
Mhm.
walking, and that's sort of my favorite form. I think, for younger people, muscular kinds of things, and even for older people, some resistance training is really helpful. And we also want you to walk so that you are keeping your lower body strong because falling becomes a major risk. Anytime you hit your head or break a bone, which are both consequences of falling as an older person, you're going to increase your risk of having cognitive decline. So walking and some resistance training is really important throughout our lifespan. And there are people who were great athletes in their youth but can't do the kind of exercise that they used to do because it's too tough on their body. I see people all the time used to be great tennis players. Some of them make it into their 70s playing tennis. A lot of them, though, have had their knees replaced, can't move laterally anymore because of what's happened to their tendons. And so they then have to change and do something else.
Yes.
But if
Yeah, one thing I did see in the book that I have not heard before, which I thought was interesting, was medications which were anticholinergic, so that they're reducing the
Yes,
acetylcholine in the brain. So, could you talk a little bit about those? And I think there was a website where you could go and check.
yes, there is. It's called Anticholinergic Burden Calculator. I think it's acbc.com. We have a link to it in our book and also
Yes.
on our website.
Okay, I will put it in the description as well. I'll
Good,
find it
good.
from the book. Yeah.
Yeah. It allows you to put in each of the medications, either prescription or over the counter things that you're taking. It'll give you a score between 0 and 3. And the reason that this is important is that acetylcholine is a chemical that we naturally have in our brain that is involved in the formation of memory. It actually works as a memory transfer chemical. What most people don't recognize is that the nerve cells in our brain, these long spindly things, look sort of like a sapling in winter with long, thin stem, lots of roots and lots of branches. Imagine those being laid end to end in networks. But also know that the branches of one nerve cell never touch the roots of those around them. There is a space in between. And in order for information to get from one end of a branch to the roots around it, there are chemicals that need to be released. One of the chemicals that gets released on one end and taken up on the other is called acetylcholine, or as some people pronounce it, acetylcholine. And then once it crosses, it gets broken down and recycled and used again. So we want to keep our acetylcholine levels at their very best. Unfortunately, as we get older, acetylcholine levels decline. And in people with memory problems, they're even lower. The medications which we have had out for 25 years or more, galantamine, uh, donepezil, and rivastigmine, they used to be known by brand names of Razodine and Aricept. Many people are familiar with that, and also Exelon. All three of these promote the maintenance of acetylcholine levels. So we're trying, these are pro-cholinergic. Now, many of the medications which we take or purchase for different things are anti-cholinergic. They lower those very important acetylcholine levels. So, number one are all the things that people take over the counter for sleep. Here in the US, they usually have a PM at the end of the name, saying like it's for night. These have diphenhydramine. That's the chemical name for Benadryl in them. Very anticholinergic. That by itself is one level of acetylcholine depriving chemical. But very often people, especially those who've got obstructive sleep apnea, get up multiple times to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. So they complain to their doctor or the urologist. Urologist gives them a medication to tighten their bladder so they don't wet the bed. It actually doesn't stop the urine production. It just makes sure they don't have an accident. Guess what? Those are often also very anticholinergic. Maybe you've got seasonal allergies. So you take medications that again contain diphenhydramine. You've got more acetylcholine inhibiting medication, anticholinergic medication. Maybe you've got a heart medication that is is anticholinergic, and you need to take that. Maybe you're also on an antidepressant that's anticholinergic. So the whole point is it's not usually just one thing. It's the burden of taking several things that adds up that can actually be suppressing your cognition. Now, it's at this point still a little unclear as to whether this by itself causes increased risk of dementia, but it's always part of what we look at when someone comes into our office or they're complaining of memory problems. They're testing as having impaired memory or attention. So we go down through their medications and try to say, okay, in addition to what's prescribed, what are you taking over the counter? And that's where we encounter some of these. And we can work with people to reduce their levels of anticholinergic medication And sometimes their physicians can also switch them to a medication that's less centrally, brain active anticholinergic. That makes a difference. They think better.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I'm just thinking we tend to get so like certainly my mother has just like an continuously adding set of things she's meant to take. But so you talked there about sleep, about how important sleep is, and particularly,
Yes.
and you talk about sleep in the book a lot. So and sleep apnea, particularly, which is as disturbing your sleep. So, what is sleep apnea, and how do we recognize whether we have it or not?
Great. So sleep apnea is bad breathing while we're sleeping. People with sleep apnea either stop breathing or have a 4% decline in their oxygen levels at least 5 times an hour while they sleep. So we test this by measuring someone overnight to see how many times do they stop breathing and how many times does their oxygen drop by 4%. And then we add those up and divide by the number of hours they sleep, sort of like how we calculate miles per gallon.
Mhm.
And it gives us a measure of their sleep breathing relationship. If it's more than 5 times an hour, 5 to 15 times an hour gives us mild sleep apnea. 15 to 25 times an hour is moderate. More than 25 tells us that it is severe. Now, how common is this? Well, if you are 58 years or older, so that's where they started using this one study of 6,000 people where they started bringing them in to look at the data. This is pretty new data. This is from 2023. So 6,000 people, all different sites across the United States coming in to basically donate their time and energies to science so that they get tested for different cardiac problems and different other medical problems every several years. It's a place here in Massachusetts where I'm from called the Framingham Heart Study. They've been gathering this kind of data for years. There's also the Mayo Clinic. There's a variety of other places. So they decided that they're going to look at this and they grouped all their data together, gave everyone out of these 6,000 people a one night home sleep test. So it's pretty easy. Put a little thing over your finger, like a little, sort of shield, and it attaches to a band on your wrist. And it collects the data of your heart rate, your oxygen level, your breathing frequency. Really cool telemetry. And they can either collect this on the device or send it by cell tower up to a data bank. What they found here is that if you're 58 years or older, your chances of having sleep apnea are 50%. 1 out of 2 people has this condition. It's vastly undiagnosed or underdiagnosed. It not only impacts dementia risks significantly. Why should it do that? I'll explain in a minute. But it also impacts things like your risk of stroke, your risk of heart attack, the likelihood of your being obese, because it also impacts the hormonal balance of different chemicals that determine if you're hungry or feel satiated with a certain amount of food in your stomach. So it actually even impacts whether or not you're likely to eat more. It impacts gout. It impacts erectile dysfunction. 50% of the men who go to get erectile dysfunction medications have sleep apnea. Shouldn't be surprising because erectile dysfunction is basically a circulatory problem. It has to do with blood circulation to your penis. So, why is this important for dementia? A couple reasons. Number one, not enough air is getting down your lungs is the cause for sleep apnea. Therefore, not enough oxygen gets pulled out of the air. Most people don't recognize that air is only about 20% oxygen. The rest of it's primarily nitrogen. So that's the job of our lungs is to pull that out take those oxygen molecules and attach them to red blood cells, which get up through our circulatory system to our brain. So a couple of things happen when you're not getting enough oxygen. Basically, you don't think very well. You tend to be foggy in your thinking. You don't have enough oxygen to make enough adenosine triphosphate, which is a energy molecule. So you're tired a lot of times. Also, when you've got sleep apnea, you have micro awakenings during the night. You're not even aware of it, but you keep going into later stages of sleep. So we have four different stages of sleep, and we need to be in the deepest level of sleep for about 15% to 20% of the night in order for some really important things to happen. One of those things is memory consolidation. This happens in stage three sleep. And the other is this whole system we've only learned about in the last several years called the glymphatic system. The glymphatic system is your night cleaning crew. It flushes out the toxins that have built up through the process of thinking and cellular activity during the day. So if you're not spending enough time in stage three sleep, and I've seen people's sleep studies where they didn't spend any time in stage three sleep the entire night, guess what? Trash is building up in your trash cans. Nobody's emptying them. You're not getting enough energy. You wake up feeling as tired as oftentimes you went to bed. You may even wake up with a headache because you're not getting enough oxygen to your brain. You go through the day feeling tired. You feel like you could fall asleep when you're driving or sitting at your desk. Oftentimes, you're going to fall asleep watching TV or reading in the evening, and you're likely to snore while you're sleeping at night and getting up multiple times to go to the bathroom. All of that because of one cause, which is you're not breathing well while you're sleeping. So if we can fix that, lots of good things happen for lifestyle, for energy, and ultimately for your brain. So it's like the secret sauce here, I keep telling people. It fits into the model, and there's a lot of emerging research showing how important it is to identify and fix this one problem. And in these new studies they're doing for all these new infusion medications, they're not measuring sleep apnea.
Mm,
They're ignoring this,
right.
even though it may be an important aspect of why certain medications work and certain medications don't.
So one question. So I have an Aura ring, so
Aha.
a consumer, yeah, tracking device, and so I can see my deep sleep, and it also gives me my average blood oxygen. Would that be enough to detect whether I have sleep apnea or not?
Probably not. It could in the next generation or two. Here's why. Well, it gives you your average oxygen saturation. It's sort of like saying my home on average is at 70 degrees, but during the night I have it at 60, and during the day I have it at 80. Uh, so that's a nice statistic, but it's not accurate for me. I want to know what is the nadir, the drop in your oxygen while you sleep. How low does it go? Now, if you can download that continuously, that's great. And I think that if they don't do it now, funny, I just had this conversation. My brother has a different device, but it's very similar to the Aura. And this is called the Whoosh or something. I don't know what he calls it,
Whoop,
but
the
the
whoop.
Whoop. Okay. And he was showing me this as well. And I was saying, yeah, but that doesn't give me enough information. It gives me a nice average. And also it tells us how many hours you're sleeping. And that's also important. You want to get at least 6 hours sleep, ideally 7 to 8. And you also don't want to sleep too much. If you're sleeping more than 10, 9 to 10 hours a night and you're not an adolescent, there's probably something else that's going on. Either you're extremely active,
Mhm.
in which case it's probably fine, or there's a problem with your circulation, your heart rate, you're depressed, or something else is going on that you should be paying attention to because your body really does not need that much sleep.
Right. Okay, interesting. What can we do about sleep apnea if we feel that we have it? We're not being able to. I don't know. Yeah, so we feel that we can't breathe properly at night.
Well, I recommend if I ruled the world at age 50, everybody would get a one night home sleep test. In
Mm,
retail in the US, they cost about $180. You need a prescription from your doctor. You can
mm.
get one for $180. I've seen them on websites that are very reliable, and the tests are they send you a device, you wear it one night, you send it back, you get a really nice printout, and you get an overview from a board certified sleep medicine doctor. So really legitimate stuff. Then you need to treat it. But if you talk to your doctor, again, I would start giving this to people at age 50 the same way we recommend doing colonoscopies, the same way we recommend doing mammograms at those levels, because of its impact on other health behaviors, especially the cardiovascular diseases. We could really make a dent. It would more than pay back whatever the cost for diagnosis and treatment is. The bigger problem is here in the US that the health insurance companies that are trying to make the best profit they can for their shareholders, it's a cost to them that is realized when people are 20 years older and on the Medicare system. So for them to put this into effect is sort of a loss leader. It's like for us, it's just going to cost us money. They're going to pay the cost later on when you're in Medicare. And that's a problem in the system here is that we got two different types of insurance, and one of them says, "What's our bottom line this quarter?" and the other one says, "Ooh, how do we do the most good for this population that's increasing in size of older people?"
Yes, yeah, there's always that conflict. So you have a checklist, which I in the book, which I really liked, of things that you can look at to see, like kind of take an inventory of where you sit in the kind of risk profile. Um, so I would like to, yeah, I saw that there were some blood markers which I was, and these ones I haven't got, so I'm planning to get them. Homocysteine and methyl malonic acid. So why are they so important?
So homocysteine and methylmalonic acid are like secondary markers and more actually more precise markers for folate or B9 level and B12 levels in your blood. When I see people or Emily sees people coming in the door, typically they've already had B9 and B12 checked by their primary care physicians, and they've either been found to be normal or they've been supplemented to get them into the normal range. That's like putting gas in your tank. The question is how much of it's getting to your brain. And the truth is, not enough may be getting to your brain, especially if you've got cardiovascular problems. That's where homocysteine is particularly important. It's a sensitive marker for interference of those B9, B12 vitamins getting there. And if it's too high, then you've got a problem. The methylmalonic acid is more of a secondary marker for how well B9 is being metabolized. So if that's elevated, it'll show you that that B9 that's so plentiful in your blood is not actually crossing the blood-brain barrier and getting to your brain. And what we list is a particular kind of prescription vitamin that combines L-methylfolate with N-acetylcholine and in a particular ratio and has been found very effective at being able to lower the level of homocysteine. And they've had some very nice research, double-blind placebo-controlled research showing improvements in memory in people with mild cognitive impairment who have this condition of hyperhomocystinemia. So if you've got this, and we don't know until it's tested, so I don't recommend people getting their doctor to prescribe this vitamin for them that they might not need. But if they have high levels of homocysteine, that's not only a increased risk for their cardiovascular health, but it also is something which can be modified rather effectively by a once a day pill that will, in some people, improve their cognition by itself. And if nothing else, help those building blocks because we need B9 and B12 getting to our brain in order for good vascular functioning in our brain to occur. So that and Emily talks a lot about she's really the expert on those sections. I defer to her by job. So splitting up how we write a book like this is really
Right.
interesting. And that was one of those chapters that I said, here, you write it, let me edit it so people like me can understand it. Is this how this goes? Yeah, that's how it goes. Okay. Because that's the whole idea with a book that's science based like this is how we want to cast a very wide net, look at all the different areas of medicine and life that can impact your dementia risk. So we're not just focused on, I mean, most of the books that are out there are focused on eat this, don't eat that. Here's a diet that will do this, or here's some product that I'm selling that's going to be good for you. We don't do any of that. But we do cast a wide net over a lot of different areas of medicine. But then we want to translate it so you don't have to have an advanced degree to understand and use it. Because otherwise, you might as well go back and read the original research in the journals. But no one's going to do that because it's really, really technical stuff. And you have to have somebody who speaks that language basically, who can say, no, no, here's what this means, and here's why this is a difference that's meaningful as opposed to one that isn't meaningful. That's what our attempt was in this book, is to take this, put it into a model, make it translatable so that you, Richard, could go, you could do your dementia prevention checklist, you could get a game plan, and you could say, wow, this is really great. I'm doing wonderfully. Or I'm doing pretty well, but here's a couple areas I could tighten up and improve, and that's going to further reduce my risk. I can go get my hearing tested because, people are having to turn up the volume a bit, and people are asking, saying things I'm not quite catching all of it. Turns out that hearing loss is one of those things we don't think about that actually is a dementia risk. So it might be something you never thought about before until you look at this and say, okay, this is worth getting my hearing tested because I want to do everything I can so that my brain works as well as it possibly can for as long as I'm alive. That's the goal.
Right. Yeah, the yeah, I should have asked how to use the checklist actually before we dived into detail. But yes, that is there were definitely some in that on that checklist that I wasn't well, I guess I kind of knew about, but were not front and center in my mind.
Hmm.
And so it is really good to go through the checklist and it says like on target, off target, and
Yeah.
near target, right? And don't
Exactly. Yeah. And,
yeah.
and now we have this checklist on our website, which is braindoc.com, www.braindoc.com, so that people can download it from there. I mean, I love when they buy the book, don't get me wrong. But if somebody wants to do the checklist and they don't necessarily want to buy the book now, go up and get the checklist. We are now pretty much close to launching an interactive version that's going to give you the opportunity to get at the end of this a colorized roadmap of your areas where you're on target, off target, and near target. So, and as well as sort of a hit list of, because we're going to put these into different columns of where you need to, or you might want to make changes to improve your brain health, and then goes through details of why these are important. So I don't know when everyone's going to be hearing this podcast, but I'm expecting in October, we're going to of 2024. This is going to be out and available to people when they go up to our website.
Excellent. That should be really good. Yeah, I did like the checklist and I went through it, did it by hand. Um,
Mhm.
and yep, I have some homework that I need to make sure I get done. Um, okay, so thank you so much for that overview. So where can people go to follow your book? I think we mentioned most of them, like BrainDoc, but is there other places where people can go?
The book is widely available. It's on
Yeah.
Amazon. It's in a number of bookstores. We have it in a variety of libraries for those people who just want to borrow it. We also, you can get it through Apple. You can download it through the book section of your iPad. It's also on Kindle, and it's also on audiobook. Very nice actress named Nan McNamara has done an excellent job of narrating the book, and it's funny. I listened to it right after it came out, and I started laughing at a joke that I've written. I didn't think the joke was as funny when I wrote it, but it's hilarious when she tells the joke. So I encourage people who like to get their information like a podcast to get the audio, download the audiobook. It's on about 4 or 5 different platforms for audiobooks, and listen to Nan read the book to you, and you'll have a lovely time doing that and learn something in the process.
Excellent. Did we cover all the websites that people should go to? There was braindoc.com.
That's the central place. That's
That's the
going to
central.
give you, if you're looking for a link to buy the book, that's there. If you're going to look for information on us, there's also about 50 other podcasts, none as good as this, but they're all available through the website. So you can click on any one of some articles that I've written that are also some Psychology Today things, a variety of things on the website. So we try to provide a lot of resources to people that they can get for free.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much. Because as I think we were talking about at the beginning, prevention is everything with dementia. It seems to be by far the best option. Well, it's always the best option, actually. Prevention is always the best.
It's not very sexy, but it really works.
Right. But it's like it's the only option at the moment for dementia.
Yes.
So, yes, it's so important. And so, thank you for providing all that information and making so much of it available for free.
Well, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate just one more plug. It's Dementia Prevention, Using Your Head to Save Your Brain, published by Johns Hopkins Press. And we're really proud and happy to talk about it. So spread the word, and
Mm,
love people to contact us and tell us what they thought.
certainly will do. Okay, Dr. Kleonsky, thank you so much. It's been great talking to you.
Same here.